group gotten bigger? Have some of the guys, maybe gotten smaller and kind of reshaped their bodies a little bit as well? And certainly being out there and seeing that South Carolina does appear to be a pretty healthy football team right now. That's obviously a storyline every fan, because of the way last year went, wants to talk about. And, I think that's been a storyline to start as well.
And Chris, as we bring you into this conversation now, you guys got the opportunity to view a couple of practices so far through fall camp, as Wes was just pointing out there. A lot of good energy, a lot of guys looking really good after hitting the weight room this entire summer. What has stuck out to you so far from what you've been able to see?
What I've heard a lot of, Tyler, is there's been a lot of conversation about the South Carolina offensive line, right? And as Wes has pointed out, both here and in his first 2 days observation, it's been 3 practices. It's been short viewing windows for the media in the first 2, and you got to keep in mind, there hasn't been an opportunity to see for various reasons, including where we are in camp. Full 11-on-11 scrimmage situations that hasn't taken place yet, and haven't been able to view it. And so there's a lot that we're going to continue to learn throughout preseason camp. And even whatever we learn is going to have that layer of exactly what we've been talking about. And that is that there's a prove it element, right? Whether it's special teams or defense or the offensive line or what Lenore Sellers can do. There's a prove element to all this coming off a 5-7 season, and that's fair. But the reason I point that out is this offensive line had so much conversation around it. You remember last year before the season, there was a point where we just almost wore ourselves out talking about the O-line because of how many questions there were. And it proved to be a very valid concern and topic of conversation, starting right with game 1 in the opener against North Carolina. You give up 9 sacks, you have injuries, you have problems on the offensive line all year. So that's obviously an area that everybody, fans, media, coaches, the players themselves, the strength and conditioning staff, they really honed in on that area. When you go 5-7, there are a lot of areas to improve, but that's one that many people have circled. And again, it's early, but the returns on the growth from the spring to the summer, and then in the early going of preseason camp, has been pretty positive from what we've heard. Everybody figured, I think, that there would be a baseline jump of some sort, just from what we saw last year, right? Pretty low bar in terms of performance. But I think early returns show that this could be a group that takes maybe more of a substantial leap. And I think there are some guys that are making runs at legitimate playing time or starting roles that maybe haven't been talked about a lot. There's more competition, there's more depth. And coming out of the summer, a lot of those guys stayed on campus, worked very hard, and there have been some positive returns so far. They're also facing a Gamecocks defensive line in practice every day that has had a little buzz behind it, which I think will only help and kind of raise the potential performance of both of those groups.
And Wes, as we've talked about so much this entire offseason, almost by default, this offensive line should be better. Again, knock on wood, assuming they're going to be healthier than last year. And not only from the standpoint of health, but the talent that you do have there with guys returning, Vershawn Lee, Ja'Kai Moore, guys like that, as well as what you brought in via the transfer portal and in as true freshmen with like Josiah Thompson, Blake Franks, Cam Pringle, those kind of guys. So carving out your starting 5 should put a pretty talented group on the field that, again, assuming everybody stays healthy, can stay together, which is something we didn't have a season ago.
Yeah, and I think there's one guy that if he's listening that's in the fan base is going to be tweeting at us here in a second saying, y'all say the O-line is going to be improved every year, and then it's not. And there's this like weird narrative that the O-line gets talked about as a strength going into multiple years, and that's really not the case. I remember dating back maybe to one of the first Muschamp seasons. Muschamp had made a comment like basically like this O-line is going to have to carry the offense, and paraphrasing, basically indicated that was going to be the strength of the offense, I think. And you kind of look back, I believe Muschamp was probably, as a new coach, looking at that group on the offensive side and just saying, we don't return a lot of experience at any other spot. So it was almost by default that it kind of turned to the O-line where you're saying those guys are going to have to perform very well for this offense to be good. And that's kind of taken on a life of its own. Like Chris said, I remember, we talked about the O-line a ton last offseason in terms of questions. And I remember it even got to a point, I don't know exactly at what point in this kind of progress of the preseason it was. We were looking around and we were like, they've not solidified that offensive tackle spot. And that ended up being the case. Obviously, I would say even before some of the injuries, and then certainly once the injuries hit, it just completely kind of made those problems even worse. And so I think for South Carolina, do you sit there and say, hey, this is going to be a dominant offensive line at this point? You're probably getting ahead of yourself, but do you sit there and say, man, you probably do feel a good bit better about certainly the depth and then just finding that first five? I think that's the key, is finding who your five guys truly are and then letting them go play together. Which kind of underclassmen or freshmen are you going to say, all right, we're just going to, like a Josiah Thompson, for example, is it, hey, he's ready, we're going to roll with him? Or is it that it's a little bit more of a slower, steady progress where he ultimately maybe takes over down the line a little bit? So I think there are still questions, but you just feel much better about them being able to answer those questions. And I do think we will start to get an even better idea moving forward, because we always have to remind ourselves they're not in full pads yet. So we're out there watching them. They're practicing, but this is not. It's closer to real football, but it's still not real football. And so for South Carolina and for teams around the country, you really start to get a sense for some of those things once you kind of start to get into this week and then get into some scrimmages and all those things.
Well, and Chris,
Yeah,
I was going to say, Wes brings up a really good point that this offensive line doesn't have to be a Joe Moore Award finalist at the end of the year. That'd be fantastic if they were, but if you can just be in the top 10 of the SEC, that'd be marginally better than what you did a season ago.
Oh, it's a great point. And look, I think it's important what you said, Wes. If you're talking about improvements to the offensive line and saying this group will be better, maybe even substantially better, that is not the same as, hey, this is an absolutely incredible group. This is the Great Wall of Carolina. That was going around in recruiting a lot. And hopefully that didn't create any too lofty expectations in fans' head. It's a cool thing to say, and maybe you get there one day. But nobody should expect that. But what you should expect is to get a lot better, right? And going back to what I said earlier, look, you're now in a position where you have a quarterback who is, simply put, he's built different. He has, a substantial talent level. You've got a Rocket Sanders, right? You flip that running back room, and then you've got an offensive line that, yes, it is on paper, but a group that is deeper and more talented and has more competition in it. And so when you're thinking about offensive line play, it's not just those things. South Carolina's, some people say, well, South Carolina's offensive line was so much better in 2010, 2011. Well, guess who they had? Connor Shaw, Marcus Lattimore, right? Like everything worked in tandem there. And so I think all those groups could help lift each other. But obviously a lot of it is going to be on the offensive line. And, to go back to what Wes said about last season, it is a different vibe. We went into last season saying, hey, there are a few spots here up for grabs. We don't know who solidified it. This year, there's a similar question in that there are probably, 3 spots, Wes, that they probably haven't solidified on the offensive line, but for a different reason. It's more of you have more options as opposed to maybe a lack of options. You have more guys fighting for those roles, to where you look at really every spot except for center and maybe right tackle and say, you go, hey, I don't know who it's going to be, but it's not because of a lack of options or an uncertainty there. It's, hey, there's probably 2 guys, maybe 3 guys at a certain spot that could legitimately win that job. And on top of that, also be a quality option. So, that's what you get when you bring in some transfers who have played, who have talent. When you sign a 5-star freshman like Josiah Thompson, when you return some guys like Troball, Tree Babalade, who have played for you and are former 4-star guys. So that was the goal. And we'll see where it gets them, but there's been some decent early returns there.
Yeah, and I think, Chris, talking about kind of the Great Wall of Carolina that they used in recruiting is sort of I guess, a rallying cry there. It's going to be fascinating to see. That's a position where it's not quite like skill spots where if you kind of bring in a big class of studs, maybe they impact right away. It's going to be fascinating. You kind of start to count backwards. And, this past class, of course, Josiah Thompson was the headliner. You go back to the guys who are now in their second year on campus, and you look at like a Tro Ball, a Marquis Anderson, the guys in that group, and then even one class before that, like a Cason Henry. It's going to be fascinating to see, like, does what they were able to do on paper on the recruiting trail really start to come to fruition this year, or are we still maybe 1 year away from that and it kind of reverts to like a Torricelli Simpkins, a Kamar Bell, who we've heard some good things about. Obviously, you bring back a Vershawn Lee, a Ja'Kai Moore. I'll be curious to see how much is the youth movement already in place versus it. I would think on paper, maybe it goes to a guy who maybe just isn't quite, certainly wasn't as highly recruited, maybe isn't quite as baseline talented as some of these young players, but that's certainly a position where experience and having 3, 4, or 5, in some cases, years in a strength and conditioning program can be a huge difference maker versus a guy who's been on campus for 1, 2, or even 3 years. So I'll be fascinated to see how much of the youth movement is already in place versus is that something that's still a little bit in the future.
Absolutely. We're certainly going to be interested to see how that plays out over the course of fall camp. Another position group we're keeping a close eye on is wide receivers. We heard from Coach Mike Ferry at Media Day on Thursday. We'll let you listen to a little bit of what he had to say about this wide open receiver room as we go through fall camp. That's coming up next on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. But real quick, want to remind you, once again, we are running the greatest Gamecock moment since the year 2000 all week long on the 107.5 The Game Twitter page. We've got our 4 winners from last week and another poll for this week. Go online to vote, and we'll crown a winner coming up next Monday, August 12th, and talk about them all day long. That is all sponsored by our friends at Columbia Craft at 520 Green Street down in the Vista. Diving into the wide receiver room coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Chris said he'll do Firehouse.
It's easy. Just go to @1075 The Game on Twitter. But also for 3. What do you think the best moment in Gamecocks history is since the year 2000? No bigger shot for Cleveland Cardinals over first 3 of the season. We'll find out in about 2 weeks on The Game. The best moment in Gamecocks history is sponsored by Columbia Craft, Green Street in the Vista. Columbia Craft, famously hopped. 1075 The Game, broadcasting live from the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. Take up to $20K off new Silverado. Stop by or shop online today and see why Herndon Chevrolet makes you smile. Together, let's drive.
All right, I don't know about y'all, but I am pretty hungry. It is lunchtime, 11:15 here on The Game, and the good news is there is an amazing lunch option for you right here in the Midlands, wherever you are. 14 different locations of Firehouse Subs ready and available to serve you. Shout out to our guy, Larry Chandler, who's the owner-operator and a big South Carolina athletics guy. All 14 Midlands Firehouse Subs locations. They make it super easy to order your lunch, dinner, or your catering. You can go to firehousesubs.com, or my favorite method, use the Firehouse Subs app. You can sign up for a free account with Firehouse Subs, and you can earn yourself some rewards toward future purchases by doing that. All of your Firehouse Subs favorites using the Rapid Rescue to go. Avoid the wait and order online. It'll be waiting on you when you get to the store. Again, 14 different locations all around the Midlands. Firehousesubs.com, or download the Firehouse Subs app. Use the Rapid Rescue to go. Earn yourself some rewards today.
Do you remember your first
Nailed that.
game? Who you were with, and where did you sit? Where did you tailgate? What were you wearing? The idea that all those memories can come flooding back the moment you set foot on campus is real. So this year and every year, come to campus and catch a game. Whatever the game, whoever you're with, just catch a game. Get your tickets today and catch a game at any time for any sport. Online at GamecocksOnline.com.
See website for details. Lending Store is not a lender and does not make credit decisions. Must be 18 years old. Not available in all states.
Man, where did you get the cash to get your car fixed? I thought you were Baroque.
That's easy. LendingStore.com.
And how did you pay your?
Dave, I'm going to call for cut number 7 in this next segment here.
LendingStore.com is helping you pay your rent too.
You know it.
Need cash fast? Go to LendingStore.com. They'll connect you to a lender in minutes to find out if you can get $500 to $5,000 as soon as tomorrow, regardless of your credit history. No paperwork, no phone calls. Just a few clicks on your smartphone and you'll find out if you're getting the extra cash you need.
Yo, that is fast. I got bills to pay and I just got approved.
If you have bills to pay, get the cash you need by going to LendingStore.com. Don't wait. Go to LendingStore.com. That's LendingStore.com.
See website for details. This app is not a lender and does not make credit decisions. Must be 18 years old. Not available in all states.
Honey, the credit card bill came and we're maxed out.
Great. Maxed out cards, rent is due, bills are piling up. We just need some extra cash to help us get by for a few weeks.
We should do what my brother did. He went to BillsHappen.com and got $3,000 the next day.
Without that credit, I don't think so.
BillsHappen.com is different. They are one of the largest personal loan networks. They can help people with all credit types up to $5,000.
I'm sure there's a lot of paperwork.
Nope, my brother said it was easy. He did it right from his phone.
If you have a regular source of income, you can be approved for a loan for up to $5,000 in minutes, and your cash can hit your bank account the next day. BillsHappen.com's lenders have millions of dollars to lend, regardless of your credit history.
Great news. I went to BillsHappen.com and we will have our money as soon as tomorrow.
Oh, that is fast.
If you need extra cash, go to BillsHappen.com. That's BillsHappen.com. BillsHappen.com.
This year, Roy and Dana Finley are shaking things up at AAA Heating and Air. For the next 12 months, they're telling their customers no. Get a new system purchase with no payments and no interest until 2025. And don't forget their 15-year parts and labor warranty, $1,500 old system buyback, and guaranteed financing. So do what I did. Call AAA Heating and Air for your free estimate today and tell them Jay Phillips sent you.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you on this Monday, making our way through fall camp, looking at a couple different position groups, talked about the offensive line in the last segment there. I want to key in on the wide receiver room a little bit because out of all spots on this entire team, there's perhaps none more wide open than what's going to be happening with the wideouts under Coach Furry. He talked to the media the other day at the open session they had on Thursday before camp got started. I want to hit cut number 7 here, Dave. This is Coach Furry talking about maybe the advantage of having a lot of unproven guys in this wide receiver room.
Yeah, I think it's a positive. I think sometimes when you have too many guys coming back that have been around, especially in a competitive room like we have, there's sometimes you can get comfortable and now with guys that it's so refreshing that you got a lot of guys that new faces, or you got the freshmen coming in that both of them, DeBron and Mazio, that we're here in the spring and kind of like an acclimation, right? But now they're in and they know the playbook and they know what we're asking them to do and practice and all that good stuff. So now they get a chance to kind of come out and be comfortable and work their tail off and be competitive. And I think it's healthy. I think it's really healthy. So, and it's exciting. We'll find out here as we get going over the next couple of weeks.
And Chris, that's what's so interesting about this is, yes, you have guys with a lot of experience coming from various places, as well as a few guys, coming back in Nick Harbor and Tyshawn Russell. But the fact that Coach Furry was not here a season ago really kind of gives you a clean slate with everybody, where nobody has a distinct advantage over anyone else when it comes to fighting for those starting spots.
Yeah, I think it's a. I don't want to say it's a good problem. I mean, in some ways it is, right? Because you've added some pieces here, whether it's freshmen or from the portal, and you also do have a second set of eyes. When Justin Stepp was at South Carolina, certainly there were some guys that took steps forward in their development. I think that's important to point out. Josh Van, broke out from a guy who, had a lot of talent coming out of high school, but didn't have that breakout year. He had that, right? Xavier Leggett, who was always super talented, he finally had his breakout year. So the staff has developed some guys, but Shane Beamer pointed this offseason as to the reason that he made some tweaks to his coaching staff. Hey, we got to do a better job of developing some of our young receivers. He pointed to development a lot, but really, not to put words in his mouth, I took that as development and recruiting, because what's the best way to develop a really good, talented playmaking wide receiver room? Well, at that position, it's to recruit really talented playmaking wide receivers and then develop them from there, of course. So I think there's a couple different aspects to it. But the other part of this is Furry is coming in with that blank slate that you referenced, Tyler. And he's talked about it. Shane Beamer talked about it last week. When they hit the field, last week, it was the first time that Mike Furry's working in a real practice setting with these guys. When they have full pads on, it'll be the first time he's running through drills as the wide receivers coach with these guys in pads. So, yeah, he's going to go back and look at tape from what they've done in the past, whether it's high school or their previous school for the 5 transfer receivers, or what they've done here. But at the end of the day, it's going to be about what they do in practice here. And so that's another spot where there's been a lot of competition. And, those 5 transfers, several of them are going to factor in. Mazio Bennett is a true freshman, from our understanding, has really looked the part and got lots of reps, looks to be positioning himself to make a run. And then you have those returners, Tyler, that you mentioned, like a Russell Harbor, Peyton Mangrum, Luke Doty. It's a room where there is more competition and some more depth. And from here, it's just about who's going to emerge. So at that position, it's a really, really critical preseason camp.
Yeah, and guys, I would say I've steadily started to feel a little bit better about that group, just that they're going to have the answers out of that kind of 7, 8, 9, players. Now, I think kind of figuring out if you're, and we may not know, we may not find out on the outside. Hopefully we will, but just internally, I think they need to identify those top 3 and then kind of that next 3 fairly quickly in camp. Like, there is a little sense of urgency. Like, I kind of do agree that there are positives to not knowing who is kind of the leader of the group yet, in that you are going to just have, like, if you're coming in, if you're Vandrevius Jacobs, who I've started to hear more and more buzz about, that was a guy, South Carolina lands him out of the transfer portal. He's a late addition. He's a younger guy. You're going, he maybe won't necessarily have to impact this team, but if he comes in, he's looking around saying, there is no established starter here. Like, if I come out and compete every single day and play well in practice, I can go ahead and earn playing time this year. I could earn a starting spot this year. So I think that sort of maybe lends itself to getting the most out of everybody every single day at practice, as opposed to maybe you're coming in and you're like the 7th, 8th, or 9th guy, and you're just like, I'm going to practice, but I'm not going to play, so I don't have to quite give everything I have. And so I do think at some point, though, that sense of urgency has to kick in, because we know you're going to be out there. Let's assume, like we all have, Sellers as the starting quarterback. The more reps that first team can get with Sellers and sort of start to, hey, I know if I'm Sellers, this guy's at the X position, this guy's in the slot, this guy's at the other outside receiver spot, and start to get down that timing, the rapport of knowing on this particular player, this particular route combination, this is where that guy's going to be on the field when this is called. So I think eventually you do want to get to that point where that sort of on-field camaraderie can start to build. I think week 1, yeah, all about competition, moving guys in and out, shuffling guys in and out. Ultimately, you don't want to be going into like game week having this same conversation internally.
I want to.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
No, just real quick. That's why these scrimmages are so important. I mean, you know, if anybody asks, who do we think the starting wide receivers could be? You can take a guess and maybe a decently educated guess, but it's pretty tight. I can't say that we've heard this guy. I mean, if you ask people who literally watch practice every day, I would imagine you're going to get some different answers on that. And that's what's been communicated by the staff as well. And sometimes what's said publicly and privately is maybe two different things, but in this instance, it's pretty close.
I want to keep the wide receiver conversation going on the other side. Coach Ferry had an interesting comment about Nick Harbor as well, who was going to obviously garner a lot of attention, especially this offseason with his rising fame with the video game and everything. But what Ferry had to say, I think, really stuck out to me, and I want that coming up next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Monday here on The Game. I'll point at you when it's time. Yeah, this will be Wes.
I think Chris is going integrated. All right, guys, let me tell you about our friends over at Integrated Media. Obviously, we're always looking for excuses to upgrade the man cave, and football season right around the corner. No better time to go ahead and upgrade everything involving the audio visuals at your home. Their services involve anything involving the smart home, home theater, audio and video, TV installation, security, and cameras. But like I said, if you want to upgrade that TV or the man cave to kind of get you ready for football, this would be a great time to do it. And our friends at Integrated Media, if you go over to their website, integratedmediainc.com, you can get a great idea of some of the things they've done at other homes in the greater Columbia area. They've been at my home. They've been at Chris's home. Let them come to yours as well and kind of take that vision you have and bring it to life. Phone number 803-948-8327. Our friends at Integrated Media want to be your one-stop shop to upgrade your audio visuals at your home.
Sorry, I think you may have had Chris turned down.
Okay.
Okay, no problem.
More comfort and, well, a better life. Try them for yourself with a free arch support fitting at the Good Feet Store. The Good Feet Store.
And then you'll do gold line at the end.
Yep.
All right.
So we don't have one coming up, right?
Not unless you want one. It's up to y'all.
Can Chris hear me right now?
No, he cannot. You want me to go over there and ask?
You want to put in one and let Chris do a Krantz here? Because we're going to be behind all week if we don't.
All right.
Honestly. Or we can just text him in this group if Dave wants to add it.
Well, I'm going to go there and tell Dave real quick.
Okay.
Did you know they do mortgages too? Whether you need a first or second mortgage, a home equity line of credit, or a loan for construction, renovation, a lot, or a manufactured home, Palmetto Citizens has you covered. They're a community financial institution based solely here in the Midlands, so they offer a refreshingly simple mortgage process you won't get from the big banks or online lenders. Along with a great rate, Palmetto Citizens mortgage team will work with you to tailor the loan to best fit your needs and budget. Apply for your mortgage today by visiting palmettocitizens.org or stopping by any of their 14 branches across the Midlands. Palmetto Citizens, proudly serving this community since 1936. Equal housing lender. NMLS ID number 449962. Approval based on credit.
Oh, I'm not sure how he can hear us, but that works. We just got to be out by 44 since we're adding a minute.
All right.
Celebrities can't get enough of Rihanna's bespoke
bespoke skincare line.
She has 147 million followers. How do we monetize?
She needs a social media associate to help her with the hype.
We should repost this. Do we need a hashtag?
Indeed can help her hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. You can schedule and conduct virtual interviews all from your employer dashboard. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
This year, Dell Technologies Back to School event is delivering impressive tech with an inspiring purpose. Learn how Dell is helping Computer Aid, whose work is helping solar community hubs with tech and AI literacy skills to empower remote, displaced, or disconnected communities around the world. Help Dell make a difference with AI-ready PCs powered by Snapdragon X series processors at Dell.com.
Dave, we're going to go with cut 9 in this next one here.
What you're talking about. Sponsored by Love.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, West Mitchell, Chris Clark. Along with you on your Monday. We'll get back into the Coach Furry audio in just a second here. But a reminder, Ultimate Season Ticket Giveaway is back. Go online to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win tickets to every home football game, every home baseball game, and every home men and women's basketball game for the upcoming sports calendar year. It's all sponsored by our friends at the Men's Clinic and the Irmo Professional Center. Again, go online to 1075thegame.com, register for your chance to win. Just like last year, we're going to take 3 finalists out to our summer golf event at Charwood Golf Club coming up at the end of the month and crown the one true winner there. So again, don't miss your opportunity to win the Ultimate Season Ticket Giveaway 2.0. Getting back to the wide receiver conversation, we played a little bit of what Coach Furry had to say about the room as a whole. But of course, a lot of people are going to be hyper focused on what Nick Harbor is able to do in year number 2, as I mentioned, especially with all the hype that he's beginning this offseason with his skills in the new College Football 25 video game. And I thought Coach Furry's answer on Nick Harbor's development was very, very interesting. We'll go with cut number 9 as he addresses what needs to be unlocked with Nick Harbor going into this next season.
Yeah, I don't know if it's unlocked. I think when you look at any of the guys, I think it's developed, right? I think it's just guys learning how to play the game, being comfortable with what we're asking them to do, becoming more confident in what we're asking them to do, become more consistent in what we're asking them to do. And I think that's all part of growth. I don't think that's people being locked into things they can't and can't do, or can and can't do. I just think when you look at him and some of the other guys in the room, they got to play ball, right? They got to play ball, and I think these next 3 weeks are going to be really neat for him and for a lot of the guys just to see how they develop, see how they pick stuff up. You don't play as fast as you can when you're thinking about a lot of stuff, and we all know he can run. We know there's a lot of guys in our room that can absolutely run, but you'll be at your fastest when you know what you're doing. And I think getting to that point is part of that development. And I think that's what I'm excited about, to see these guys get to that point.
And Wes, this goes back to the conversation that we were having a year ago going into his freshman year, where y'all warned everyone that, hey, this is not a position that he is used to playing, that he comes in as an athlete that is having to learn the wide receiver spot. And it's not doubting his ability to play the spot. It's just making it become second nature, where he's not having to think about it as much. It's just becoming the muscle memory of doing it over and over and over again, which again, when you had this offseason where he wasn't as involved with football stuff because of track things, you wonder how long that's going to take before it becomes that second nature like you hope it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler, I feel like we talked till we were blue in the face this time last year, just kind of not being negative, but just trying to create fair expectations for Nick Harbor. And then, of course, when he's not out there game 1, instantly you had people who were kind of questioning that decision. And why can't you just send him on a fly route? Why can't you find a way to get him involved? And as with anything, I think there are certainly different levels to things. Like, a guy with that athleticism, is there a case to be made for trying to find a way to get him involved and find a way to sort of use his skill set? Of course, but I think there was also a good bit of pressure on him, on the staff, because he was so well known as just this figure, this athletic figure, viral on, from some of his races, just being this massive kid who could run so fast. And it is easy to forget. It's easy for people to forget, like, playing wide receiver is not easy. Like, this is a skill. Like, I think a lot of times we see this in recruiting as well, or we see it in evaluation of recruiting, to be specific. How many times, and Chris can attest to this, how many times when a receiver pops up on the radar is the first thing that gets mentioned, oh, this guy is big and he's fast, or this guy runs a 4.3. It's always about, a lot of times, the physical traits someone has. And really, playing receiver goes back to, can you catch the football? Like, that's first and foremost. Can you get open? Which I would even say getting open, yes, having some athleticism and agility and all those things, some quickness, certainly translates to getting open, but it's not a direct translation either. So I think this is why a lot of times you take an athletic quarterback and people are like, oh, move him to receiver, and we expect him to be able to play and play well right off the bat. And then we're always reminded, unless it's just a guy who is just immensely multifaceted in what they can do athletically, it's just not that easy. So I think as this kind of preseason process rolls on, Chris, we will start to get an idea of what should the fair expectations be for Nick Harbor this time around compared to what the fair expectations should have been going into last season.
Yeah, and it's such a great point that you make about just the traits part. Like, look, if you go to which guys are ranked the highest coming out of high school, which guys ultimately get drafted the highest, yes, they are generally going to be guys who can really run. These days in 2024, not necessarily a bunch of big guys, right? It's not, oh, you got to be 6'4" and run a 4.4. First of all, there's not that many of those type of guys. But there's a lot of smaller receivers who are among the elite in the NFL. Yes, you want guys to be able to run, but the best trait, and I think any receiver or any receivers coach will tell you this, is separation. It was funny looking back at last cycle, Wes. I know you and I talked about this a lot. There were some receivers that South Carolina was recruiting, and a couple that they landed, whether it was out of the portal or in high school recruiting, and you'd ask some people who were familiar with their game, from a scouting perspective, hey, what stands out about this guy? And it was so funny because you would often get back, he can catch, and you do kind of lose that in the whole receiver thing. Can a guy get open and catch? And honestly, that's why we're hearing so much about Mazio Bennett. And I mean no disrespect when I say this, he's not the fastest guy in that receiver room. I don't know where he would rank in there. It's certainly not at the top. But in terms of his route running ability, in terms of his ability to get open and just his feel for the game and ability to catch the football and make things happen, he's probably in the upper echelon of that group. I had a player at Media Day the other day bring him up as one of the standouts on the entire offense from, spring and summer. Camp had obviously not started at that point. And they said, simply put, he just does things that freshmen shouldn't be able to do. And when he said that, I don't think he meant even from a physical standpoint, like he's outrunning everybody. I think he just meant he has a feel for the game that's kind of a little beyond his years. And so ultimately that's what it comes down to at receiver. And so I think the guys that ultimately win this job and play the most this season in that starting rotation in that top six, it may not be the biggest guys on the team or the fastest guys on the team. It's going to be the guys that Mike Furry, who was very successful in the NFL as an undersized guy who couldn't outrun everybody. It's going to be the guys that know how to get open and catch the football. And so that makes it one of the most intriguing battles, I think. Not to overuse the word intriguing, but it really is with that position.
And that's an interesting point that he also brought up when talking to me the other day, was not being married to the idea of having to have an X guy, be 6'3" or 6'4" on the field at all times, which is ideal and kind of what we traditionally think of when you think about a core of wide receivers. But I talked about this with Jack a little bit earlier. Of course, he's a big Buffalo Bills fan. A couple of years ago, they had a wide receiver room comprised of Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, and John Brown as three of their main guys. And yeah, they had a couple guys in there with some size, but their key guys were on the smaller side that could get separation, that did have that speed. And I'm not saying that's exactly what the mold of what South Carolina is going to be this year, but it has been proven to work at different levels of football, again, kind of going against the norm of what you think of a traditional wide receiver room to be.
Yeah, Tyler, I mean, I think you better be able to run, man. Like, I think if you're also happen to be 6'2" or 6'3", yeah, that's a bonus. That's an added bonus. But I think first and foremost, you better be able to create that separation. Now, are there guys that maybe break that mold? I mean, there are also guys that I think aren't necessarily traditionally fast. Like if you put them on, a 40-yard dash, electronically time them, maybe they're not, quote, fast, but on a football field, they just have a knack. They have a way to get open. I mean, Alshon Jeffrey was not the fastest guy in the world, but he found a way to get open and maneuver his body to, even when he was covered, he was open. Sidney Rice was a big, long, kind of long stride type guy, but he still knew how to run routes for a guy that was 6'4". So I think it's a little bit more of a nuanced position than, oh, you're just fast. Like, I think getting open and, Chris talked about Mazio. Like, this kid has been a refined route runner in some ways since he was like a freshman or sophomore in high school, because he just understands that that's so important in learning how to get open and beat man coverage and all those things. And so I think in a perfect world, you look at that X spot, would they love for like a Nick Harbor or a Delvon Campbell? To me, just from a body type standpoint, would they love for one of those two guys to emerge and then let you sort of fill in the blanks with the other positions? I think that would be the perfect situation. However, if that doesn't happen, if one of those guys is not one of the three best on, in that room, then could you see someone else that's not a bigger guy, that's not kind of a traditional X, slide over there? I think Jared Brown has played quite a bit of that spot. I think Mazio is more of a slot. I think Mazio could start in that slot spot. And then I think the rest of the receiver room will kind of fall into place, though, based on what happens at that X spot.
Absolutely. We'll see what happens as the rest of the fall camp rolls along. We'll come back. We'll recap the recruiting weekend that was. South Carolina did land one commitment, but missed out on a couple of others. We'll detail that coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here in the game.
All right, I want to tell everybody about our great partners over at Krantz Cooling and Heating. That's KrantzCooling.com. Krantz with a K, cooling with a K.com, or 803-672-3224. I'll give you the name and the website again here shortly. But they can take care of any of your HVAC needs right here in the Midlands. Since 1983, they've been a family-owned and operated business. I know Justin Krantz well. I've had his team come out to my home to give me a free second opinion on coil leaks and compressor. Let me know what's going on. Help me get a roadmap to the future. When it's hot in the summer in Columbia, you want to make sure that you can get in front of any problems. But if you got an actual problem right now, they can help you with that too. If you're thinking about getting a new unit, they can help you do it. KrantzCooling.com, Krantz with a K, cooling with a K, or 803-672-3224.
Chris, if you can hear me, you nailed both yours to like the final second. Good job.
It's pretty good in case of an emergency. The single most important function of your phone is the game. But both defenses have been this year. What's so funny? That noise. You can listen anywhere. Just go to iTunes or Google Play and download the game app now.
This is Maggie Gray with the Sports Minute. 20 losses in a row and counting. That's just the latest skid from the Chicago White Sox, who are turning in a historically awful season at 27-87. Get this, even if the Southsiders somehow won every game left on their schedule, they still finished the year 12 games under 500. Woof, I'm Maggie Gray.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Grainger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Some people just know the best rate for you is a rate based on you with Allstate. And look at you, hands perfectly placed on the wheel. Not like the driver to the right of you who's really going after that drum solo. Save with DriveWise on the Allstate app and only pay a rate based on you. Not available in every state, subject to terms and conditions. Rating factors and savings vary, and in some states your rate could increase with high-risk driving. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois.
You have sagging, soft, or bouncy floors in your home? Well, this could be a sign of rotten wood caused by moisture in your crawl space. Damaged wood in your crawl space can affect your home's foundation, and that can affect your home's value, and nobody wants that. Say goodbye to sagging floors and hello to a stable foundation. Contact Canty today for your free inspection at 803-424-8380 or visit cantycanfixit.com.
Wesley Financial Group is not a law firm.
Are you a victim of the timeshare trap and think there's no way out? I'm Chuck McDowell, founder of Wesley Financial Group, the original timeshare cancellation expert. And I'm here to tell you that there is a way out. All you need to do is give my office a call. I will send you a timeshare exit information kit absolutely free, explaining how the timeshare industry works and your options for cancellation.
Call Wesley now for your free info kit. 800-511-4545. 800-511-4545.
Financial Group.
Hey, can you blow up some balloons for Jack's party?
I can't. I'm so congested.
You need Sinex Saline from Vicks.
Sinex Saline nasal spray.
Yeah, just Sinex. Breathe.
Sinex Saline instantly clears everyday congestion associated with colds and year-round allergies with a gentle, ultra-fine mist that's no mess and easy to control.
Daddy, we need more balloons.
On it. Enjoy life's important moments without congestion. Try Sinex Saline from Vicks. Just Sinex. Breathe. Use as directed.
Hey guys, it's Preston Thorne from your broker, my broker, Benji Getzi at Buford Lending. Buford Lending is a true mortgage broker offering the widest variety of government mortgage programs and the best mortgage experience for clients through its state-of-the-art technology and record low interest rates. Their goal is to make your next mortgage experience and closing easier, cheaper, faster, and friendlier. Whatever you do, don't wait. Shop and lock your rate today with Buford Lending. Don't go to Wall Street. The rates are better on Bay Street. Online at Buford.mortgage.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you for a few more minutes here on your Monday on the game. It was a very important weekend for Gamecocks recruiting as we had 3 potential names on the docket to make commitments to South Carolina. Unfortunately, only one of those ended up being the case, that being Kendall Daniels on Friday, the 4-star safety out of Virginia, as both Jared Smith and Jalen Gilchrist did decide to go elsewhere. But Wes, as you and I talked about on Friday, this is still a very big get for the Gamecocks to add to their secondary room, which is going to need more bodies into it going into next season.
Yeah, a well-fought recruiting win here for South Carolina with Kendall Daniels, a kid that they've been in on for quite some time. And like we talked about, they felt really good about him dating all the way back to the spring game weekend. You know, there was a welcome home that weekend. And he had...
All right, 1 second here. We'll work to get Wes back going again. But Chris, as we talked about a second ago, that again, Kendall Daniels is a very big get for the South Carolina secondary room. Even though you didn't get all 3 of those guys, still a very big ad for South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about who you sign in recruiting. And nowadays, it's about who you sign in December. We used to say, not too long ago, 2017 and before that, you got to wait and see who you get in February. Starting in 2018, that really shifted because the vast majority of guys sign in December. It seems like nowadays the vast majority of prospects enroll in January as early enrollees. It's been a big push for that in recent years. And of course, you got the transfer portal mid-year in December as well. So a lot more activity nowadays. And the reason I say that is one thing. There's been so much focus on who South Carolina has not landed commitments from. Just like we've seen South Carolina lose some guys in terms of them publicly committing to another school as of late. Those are tough. I mean, if they hold, they're tough losses. They're guys that South Carolina's recruited for a long time that, you need those types of guys to continue driving your program forward. But there are those guys where you get a sense, hey, could they be a wait and see? Could it change? Some programs have obviously continued recruiting South Carolina's guys, landed some uncommitted guys, flipped some guys. Could the Gamecocks be eventually on the other end of that with a good season? Maybe. We need to leave that door open as a possibility. But there's also been a little bit of a lost focus on some of the guys that they have gotten. And Kendall Daniels, despite it being, kind of a 1-for-3 weekend for South Carolina, is the culmination of a guy that they've recruited for a very long time, a guy from a state that they've recruited very well in Virginia from a great high school program, who's a 4-star guy with a lot of very interesting physical characteristics, who really seems to fit the bill of, what Torian Gray looks for in the secondary. And I don't think it's an apples to apples comparison by any means, but when you look at Kendall Daniels, you see a guy that, Nicky Minori was this big, rangy guy at the high school level. And I think maybe just from a physical skill set standpoint, maybe you see some similarities there with Daniels. So definitely a really good get for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, I like that Daniels, guys, is kind of a true free safety. Like, you look at what he does at the high school level, he does have that length that Torian Gray very much covets, but then you watch him, he's kind of playing that center field role. I think Carolina has some safeties that have maybe become more kind of your inside the box guys and can come up and hit you. But Kendall, I think you look at the ball skills that he has, the ability to kind of go sideline to sideline. You hear that maybe from a linebacker standpoint a lot, but more I'm talking playing center field, letting your guys play man coverage in front of you, and feeling like he can be that last line of defense to go track down balls. There's a diving interception on his tape that's very impressive for a safety type in terms of just showing the ball skills and ability to go get the football. And then he's not scared to come up and hit you either. So I think when you look at what South Carolina wants to be on defense, when you look at what Torian Gray sort of covets at those positions, Kendall Daniels, consensus 4-star guy, like a top 25 safety in the country. And for my money, just watching the film, is a guy who I think could maybe even move up as he progresses through his senior year.
And when you look at, again, being able to get Kendall Daniels, again, you unfortunately missed on those other 2 guys. But as we look at this class as a whole, it is starting to come together pretty nice. I know it was kind of some late additions as we got in the summer, but still room to continue to improve as we're, 4-ish months away from early signing day. So plenty of time for Beamer and company to finish off this class nicely.
Yeah, and guys, I'll be curious to see, do we see more high school guys emerge? We know they offered Jackson rep here in the last week or so. Does this become, hey, it's mostly transfer portal, except for a couple of guys the rest of the way? Because so many guys have made summer decisions. I know there's a couple of kids who maybe are still out there that they're recruiting, but I think it's going to be fascinating. Are there some senior sort of guys that have big senior years and maybe pop up on the radar in the next couple of months?
For sure, and we'll certainly keep an eye on it and monitor it as it goes, as well as fall camp. So we get through our first full week of camp coming up this weekend, just 26 days away from kicking things off between South Carolina and Old Dominion in week number 1. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Coming up next, halftime show with myself and the returning Terry Ford as we get you through the first full week of August. That's all coming up next right here on The Game.
Tyler, are you going to tell me when? All right, guys, before I get out of here, let me tell you about our friends over at Gold Line Framing, a longtime supporter here of our show, and we'd love for you to go support them as well. Owner Kendall Walsh, manager Johnny James, they're going to take great care of you in any and all of your custom framing needs. That could be diplomas, that could be original artwork, canvases, jerseys, flags. Maybe you've got a signed print that you want to take to the next level with a custom frame. They can handle that for you as well. Throw it on the wall there in the man cave. Gold Line Framing has been in business for over 20 years, so head on over to 511 12th Street, West Columbia. In-store, you can check out their art gallery, their home decor, furniture, and gift items. If you already have something you want to get framed up and you're ready just to take that next step, or if you have questions, call them today, 739-1337 is the number. And, of course, as always, if you want to check them out on Instagram, it's at Goldline Framing SC. Again, hit up Goldline Framing for any and all of your custom framing needs.
All right, good stuff.
Hey, appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem.
See you, Tom.
See ya.
Every time you make a savings deposit of just $25, you'll be entered into